Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, fellow citizens, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention Weekly News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm the president of the We the People Convention organization. And our podcast and our website and our organization is supported by the generous donors to the We the People Convention who pay for our text messages, our emails, our social media, our website, our podcast, our donations to so many other conservative groups and causes that help us do what our mission is, and that is to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And so we thank our donors for making this all possible, and we thank you for taking your time to join us this week to learn what's going on in our world and maybe get some better understanding of how it all fits together and why it's happening, and then to take action for us together, all of us as Americans, to take action to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity at the local, state, and federal level, right? That's what this is all about. So thank you so much for joining us as we move into April and just, time just keeps flying by. There's nothing like Trump time. I'll tell you that much. We are living in a world where the news and changes are coming so rapidly. It's unbelievably difficult to keep track of what's going on. And we're going to try to help you do that in this podcast by focusing on things that really are important that you really do need to know about. So we open this morning, with this visual because this is important for all of us.
Integrity, splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
Yeah, that was awesome to see. For those of you in my age bracket, to go back to, when we were a lot younger, to the Apollo program, we those parachutes opening and that capsule coming down brought back some pretty strong memories. And, it was interesting, Artemis, the Artemis 2 was this mission. And I said, well, what's Artemis? And Artemis was the twin god to Apollo. And so that's why it was named Artemis, because the Apollo was the first, moon effort, and now the second moon effort is going forward. And it was amazing to see, and just a tribute to you and me and to America and to our culture and to capitalism to create the wealth and the technical ability to be able to do this, to take man and women and humankind and have them go around the moon and go further into space than any human in existence who's ever lived has been able to do. And to do that in a time of a war, where if we're fighting a war and we still have the wherewithal to do this, and you should take great pride in it. And I hope you did. And I want to show this picture because, it shows the astronauts, as they were outside the capsule in the raft. But I want you to just look, if you're on your TV or your phone, zoom in and look at how charred that capsule is. Because I want to remind everyone, this is dangerous stuff. This is not simple. What we just did is incredibly difficult, and yet we still did it. And I just don't think enough people respect what it takes to have a mission that was that successful. And as I said to you, and I hope you all took my invitation to go to wethepeopleconvention.org and read the article where I said this time it's about more than another walk on the moon. This is not about us just walking on the moon. This is about national security. This is about energy security. This is about our future. Artemis is going to put astronauts on the moon to build a base to have humans there permanently. And not like 50 years from now, like this is taking. We're talking in 2028. We're talking about a major change, and really kind of back to what you and I believed would happen during Apollo. We thought it would continue, and it didn't. And now we've wasted 50 years, but I think the journey is back on, and it's pretty exciting. And so I just wanted to start with that hopeful, powerful, visual and message about our current situation, about humankind, because there's certainly enough negative, and we're going to talk about a lot of negatives in this podcast, but it's also, there's a lot of positives. You just have to look for them, okay? So I want to start with that. So, the week started with the U.S., strikes Karg Island, weapons depots and air defense facilities in a message to Iran ahead of Trump's deadline, because as all of you are more than aware, President Trump started the week by saying, you either sign, you agree to a ceasefire by Tuesday at 8 p.m. or it will be the end of your civilization. The United States bombed dozens of weapons depots and air defense facilities on Karg Island overnight in a message to Iran about what will happen if the Islamic Republic does not accept the terms of President Trump's ceasefire deal on Tuesday at 8 p.m. U.S. strikes on the island, which hosts Iran's central oil hub, targeted military bunkers and storage facilities, air defense systems, and other military facilities, NBC News reported, while oil infrastructure remains unscathed for the time being. Israeli military hit petrochemical sites on southern Pars gas fields earlier this week, but Fox News reported that Monday night attack on Karg Island was solely a U.S. operation. So, before the deadline, Trump was sending a message, and so was Israel. Israel launched their largest airstrikes yet on Hezbollah in Lebanon. So while Trump was teeing it up for the Tuesday event, dozens were killed in Beirut. Hezbollah renews rocket attacks on Israel. IDF announces, that they were going to continue to bomb Hezbollah because to them it wasn't part of the ceasefire agreement. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, who mediated between the U.S. and Iran, declared in his post announcing the 2-week ceasefire overnight, Wednesday to Thursday, that it would cover Lebanon as well. Iran said the same. Trump weighed in later, telling a PBS reporter during a phone interview that Lebanon was not included in the Iran ceasefire. So this became a sticky wicket, as it were, because, is it part of the ceasefire or not? And then obviously we'll talk more about the Straits of Hormuz did not open up. And so lots of criticism about the ceasefire wasn't really a ceasefire, et cetera. But we're going to get into that, okay? We're going to go deeper into that, all right? But I do want to just take a minute because Hegseth and General Resign Kane held a briefing this week that got way too little coverage. And there were some things in this that I'll post a link on our podcast page that are just stunning. I mean, stunning. And you need to know this so you understand the scope of what we accomplished. Okay? And the details are important. So let me just take a minute to give you some details of what has happened in 38 days. By any measure, epic fury decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat ineffective for years to come. This is Hegseth saying this. You see, in less than 40 days, one of our combat commands, Central Command, using less than 10% of America's total combat power, dismantled one of the world's largest militaries. The world's leading state sponsor of terrorism proved utterly incapable of defending itself, its people, or its territory. Then General Kane said, since the beginning of major combat operations, the United States Joint Force has struck more than 13,000 targets and more than 4,000 dynamic targets that popped up on the battlefield and were immediately addressed. So of the 13,000, 4,000 were ones that we didn't have on a target list, but they came to launch a drone, popped up, and we blew them up 4,000 times. thanks to the exceptional command and control system and intelligence acumen and agility of our joint force. CENTCOM forces destroyed approximately 80% of Iran's air defense systems, striking more than 1,500 air defense targets, more than 450 ballistic missile storage facilities, 800 one-way attack drone storage facilities. All of these systems are gone. We've devastated Iran's command and control and logistics network, destroying more than 2,000 command and control nodes and degrading their ability to target the U.S. and friendly forces. 150 ships are at the bottom of the ocean, and half of the RGC's Navy's small attack boats. Joint fires projected from the land, sea, and air executed more than 700 strikes against naval mine targets. And we assess that we have destroyed more than 95% of their naval mines. This is going to become important here in the next segment. And perhaps most importantly, we've destroyed Iran's defense industrial base, their ability to reconstitute these capabilities for years to come. We attacked, among other partners, approximately 90% of their weapons factories. Every factory that produced Shadi-1 attack drones was struck. Every factory that produced the guidance system that go into those drones was struck. Their missile defense industrial base was shattered, with more than 80% of their missile facilities gone, as well as their solid rocket motor production capabilities. It will take years for Iran to rebuild any major surface combatants, as more than 20 naval production and fabrication facilities have been damaged or destroyed, and nearly 80% of Iran's nuclear industrial capacity is gone. In 38 days, folks. In 38 days, using 10% of our ability. That's amazing. And people want to tell you, lie to you that, oh, we're losing. We lost the war. There's never been a more, overwhelming defeat of anyone. And the most important part is we suffered so few casualties. Okay? Perspective is important here. Don't believe the lies. And we're going to get into the whole Straits of Hormuz thing next, okay? So I sent out to you guys, my good friend Bob France from his Strictly Speaking podcast on Rumble asked me to come on after Trump announced a ceasefire. And he and I had a 45-minute discussion, which you can watch at wethepeopleconvention.org, where everyone was just panicking because Trump announces a ceasefire, and within minutes, Iran is launching missiles at Israel, and Israel's bombing Lebanon, and the straits aren't opening, and panic city. And I tried to talk with Bob, and you'll see it, in that video if you watch it, that we've got to just stop with all the instantaneous analysis based on no facts. No facts. We don't know what Trump knows. We don't know what Hegseth and our defense people know. And what we're doing, and what is the nature of social media, is we're like extrapolating everything to a degree where it just distorts it. It doesn't expose the truth. It distorts it. It's like being one of these scientists that digs for dinosaur bones, and you find this little bone, okay, and you're trying to figure out what dinosaur it might have come from, and you don't have any other bones, but then you're saying, well, it was this big, and this year was roaming the earth and all that, and then you find out years later you're completely wrong. There needs to be a patience, a time to let things play out. Because nothing in the real world happens like it does on social media. Because the real world is real and social media is not. Okay? And so, I talked to him about, the fact that, Trump is not just fighting Iran. We're fighting China. We're fighting, the terrorism that's going on. We're fighting the Muslim extremists all at one time. And so it's a bunch of steps and getting NATO involved. We saw that blow up. We're going to cover that. And it just was difficult. So President Trump said, based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive forces being sent tonight to Iran and subject the Islamic Iran and subject to Iran Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Straits of Hormuz. I agree to suspend the bombing and attacks out of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire, meaning both sides have to stop firing. Okay? All right. So then, after lots of lies, I think it was CNN that actually published something that came out of Nigeria claiming to be the spokesman from Iran, that they published it as if it was fact, right? To make my point about we don't know anything and there's just lots of lies and misinformation. The people in Iran finally made a statement on behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I express gratitude and appreciation to my dear brothers from Pakistan. In response to the brotherly request of Prime Minister Sharif in his tweet, and considering the request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by protesters about acceptance of our general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations, I hereby declare on behalf of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Straits of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. Now, that got blown off when this statement got made, but you're about to find out that that statement, that last piece in that statement, was really the whole deal, okay? And you're going to be very interested in that. So this was just a clip by Gordon Chang with Laura Ingraham that I think has an interesting perspective.
Gordon, this was a wild day. We wrote the show one way, and once again, Donald Trump he's playing this kind of kabuki theater with everyone, keeping everyone on their toes. But nevertheless, the calculus with China and Iran does not change very much, at least not right yet.
Yeah, the Chinese, they saw a determined President Trump get his way. This is a great day for America. And China, although it's been supplying Iran with weapons and all sorts of stuff, actually is a bystander. They do not want to stand up to the United States. They know they don't have the power. They know that Trump is making history, and they can't do anything about it. So this is a great day for the United States.
Yeah, you didn't hear many people saying that, did you? Right? All the worry warts and the Iran's 10-point plan, you can't agree to that. And then the Trump people are saying you don't even know what the 10 points are. There were probably 7 versions of their 10 points out there, okay? And yeah, Trump knows the Iranians are liars. He knows they're trying to buy time. That doesn't mean he's going to let them. I said, in my interview with Bob France that, listen, for those of us who've spent years fighting to get Donald Trump elected president first in 2016 and then back in office in 2024, we've spent blood, sweat, tears, money, effort, relationships, our health, all kinds of things to get this man in office. Why? Because we trust him. Not because we follow him blindly. We certainly have a right to criticize and think, independently. But he has earned our trust. How? By being right about Russia, being right about the Europeans ripping us off, being right about China, being right about the economy, and being right about the Democrats. He's earned it. And who are we to say, all of a sudden he's wrong on the biggest thing he's doing? And this nonsense about, the Israelis tricked them into doing this. Yeah. Nobody tricks Donald Trump into doing anything. I'm serious. The man thinks for himself. He's got a plan. He's got a strategy. And he's fighting it the way he knows how to fight it. And you may not like his style, but you sure as hell have little right to question what he's doing and what his motivations are. Because his motivations are America first, America always, even though it's real easy for the MAGA crowd and us to say, oh, we don't want these foreign wars. We don't want these foreign wars. I was surprised he did this. But also, I can see the benefit. I can see what's happening with NATO, and that's a good thing. I can see what's happening in the Middle East. I can see what's happening with China. Benefit of the doubt till proven wrong. Okay? Let's relax a little bit. And then, so here's that little nugget that I wanted to share with you, because this is a little bit important. For those of you who are on the radio, I'll read it to you. Breaking. Iran cannot fully reopen the Straits of Hormuz because it cannot find some of the mines it placed in the waterway and lacks the capability to remove them, per multiple U.S. officials cited by the New York Times. The mines were laid quickly by small IRGC boats, and some have since drifted from their original positions. New York Times also reports that the statement that I read to you about earlier, technical limitations, his comment of reopening was specifically about the mine removal program. They can't find some of their mines, and so he's saying, yeah, it's open, but we got a problem. Yeah, and that's a problem we are going to have to solve. And President Trump knows that. Okay? So everyone said, oh, they're just violating, the truce and all that stuff. Yeah, kind of. Right? They're not coming along. There's a lot of competing interests in Iran, to say the least, right? Who don't want to quit. They want to die. They want to die. Okay? But someone asked me last night, what I think is going to happen, and I think that Trump's going to either get a good deal or he's going to impose his will. So, the story, this morning, as we go into this weekend, U.S. and Iran prepare for high-level talks as Israel and Hezbollah trade more fire. With the ceasefire in Iran still shaky, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance headed Friday to Pakistan for high-level talks with Iranian officials as Israel and Hezbollah traded fire and Tehran maintained its stranglehold on the Straits of Hormuz. Again, they aren't maintaining a stranglehold. They don't have any control of the Straits of Hormuz. Okay, and yet you're going to be told that, oh yeah, that's their leverage point. They don't have any control. All right, and there's quite frankly, there's a strategy out there where Trump says, okay, you want to shut down the Straits of Hormuz? I got news here. We're going to shut it down, because if we shut it down, China has no fuel, Iran has no money. Two can play this game. Careful, don't project too much, don't read too much into it. Okay? Give it time. Many issues could derail the truce, and the negotiations aimed at making a broader deal to stop the fighting permanently. Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency, close to the paramilitary Revolutionary Guard, claimed that this talk set for Saturday would not happen unless Israel stopped its attack on Lebanon. And U.S. President Donald Trump complained that Iran was doing a very poor job by not allowing the free flow of ships through the strait. Meanwhile, Kuwait was targeted by 7 drone attacks since Thursday, and Iran is still attacking their Muslim neighbors. And then, basically, they're trying to figure out how do we get to a point where there's some control and command of this situation. So it's important that Trump intervened with Netanyahu and basically said, you've got to start negotiating with Lebanon. So Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Friday he was open to ceasefire talks with Lebanon a day after its bombing of the country reportedly killed Hezbollah security chief Naim Qassem. Lebanon retaliated to the Israel strikes by sending around 70 missiles over the border in northern Israel, though these strikes reportedly caused only minor damage. Israel continues clash with Lebanon. Its neighbor north have endangered the U.S. peace talks with Iran. Now, Netanyahu says he's open to talks with Lebanese leaders, and in fact, they're going to meet. They're going to meet for the first time direct talks between Lebanon and Israel in 46 years. Okay? Lots happening. So, that's where we've got to understand that this war, is complex, and you just can't wave a wand and make things go away. Like the mines. You got to go clean up the mines. And that could take some time, but it's worth it. It's more than worth it for the world at large, okay? More than worth it. But I want to make clear to you guys that, it's just like the space flight. It looks so easy. Their landing yesterday could not have been more perfect. I mean, they hit the window to come in through the atmosphere dead on. Everything to the second. The parachutes came out. It was awesome. And you know what? Some people say, well, that doesn't look too hard. Oh, those parachutes came out and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm sitting there praying the parachutes come out, praying that they get through the atmosphere, because this is dangerous stuff and it's hard. And so is war. And so because I read to you all the success we have, it's easy for everyone to go, well, yeah, this is no big deal. It's a TV show. Well, it ain't a TV show. So I want to share this story with you just to keep just getting some perspective here. FBI report says Iran-linked hackers disrupted U.S. oil and gas systems. Iran-linked groups have broken into Rockwell 5000 logic designer, a program that is used to control industrial systems, according to this advisory. Okay? This is not a joke. This is serious. The FBI says a group of Iranian-affiliated APT actors are targeting internet-exposed public utilities with the intent to cause disruptions to U.S. critical infrastructure organizations. The FBI insists a report reads, using an acronym for Advanced Persistent Threat Groups. That's what APT stands for, Advanced Persistent Threat Groups. Targeting campaigns against U.S. organizations have recently escalated, likely in response to the war in Iran. No kidding. Iranian-linked groups are targeting programmable logistic controllers made by Rockwell Animation. The report states, noting that this has led to disruptions across several U.S. critical infrastructure sections. You haven't heard about any of that, right? But we've been hit. That's, again, we were all when the war broke out, everyone's like, oh my gosh, Iran's going to unleash their sleeper cells in the United States and we're going to have attacks on the homeland. And there were attacks. I think there were 5. They were pathetic. They were individuals. But that's real. That's terrorism in the United States. So it's not like you aren't involved. It's not like America isn't at war. We are at war, and you need to keep that in perspective. I shared this story with you because I wanted to show you how American ingenuity is playing a role here, okay? And this is a Fox News report. U.S. ingenuity wins again. New gun takes out drones for $10 each. And so there's a video, on this story. If you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, you can watch this. It's a 3-minute video. And it shows that what these guys in Texas did is they figured out how to take AI and attach it to a 50-millimeter machine gun and basically track drones and use only one bullet in most cases to shoot down the drones. And see, there's been all these stories about, the Iranians are using $10,000 drones and we're using $4 million missiles and we can't win and all that. And I tried to show you some other things, okay? But this was just classic American ingenuity. And so, again, for those of you who know guns, a 50 caliber round will stop a car dead by piercing the engine block. So think what a 50 cal shell does to a frickin' plastic drone, right? And the videos on that show them getting blown to pieces. And so this is a thing that can be used around our military bases. We did this story about, the drones around the B-52 base in Louisiana. And they're talking about using these around football stadiums and everywhere else. Because it's cheap and it's effective. And the economics suddenly shift. If I can shoot your $10,000 drone down with a $10 round, guess who wins that fight? And guess what? We got a hell of a lot more 50-millimeter rounds than you got damn drones where you can make damn drones, okay? So, again, perspective, trying to give you perspective. So I want to focus now on, again, one of the things that are being done that aren't, apparent to people just looking at the war. And that is, what is Trump doing with NATO, right? We've got a problem here. Trump complains NATO wasn't there when we needed them after talks with alliance leader Rutte. Okay? So Trump is mad. He asked, Britain, France, Germany, everybody in the EU that, we defend, that we have 100,000 troops that are defending, that you and I, our taxpayers, spend billions, hundreds of billions of dollars protecting them. And when we need their help, they didn't come. President Donald Trump repeated his complaint about NATO after a closed-door meeting with the Alliance Secretary General Mark Rutte on Wednesday for discussions that had been expected to be aimed at soothing Trump's anger with the military alliance over the Iran war. Ahead of the private meeting, Trump has suggested that the U.S. may consider leaving the transatlantic alliance after NATO countries ignored his calls to help as Iran effectively shut the Straits of Hormuz, a vital shipping waterway that sent gas prices soaring. Okay? Afterwards, Trump issued an all-caps comment on social media suggesting he remained aggrieved. All caps. NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again, Trump said in his post. The White House didn't immediately offer any further details, right? And so you should know that, of course, after Trump's first term, the deep state and the Democrats, commies, passed a law in 2023 that prevents any U.S. president from pulling out of NATO without its approval. Trump has for a long been a critic of NATO, and in his first term has suggested he had the authority on his own to leave the alliance, which was founded in 1949 to counter the Cold War threat posed to Europe's security by the Soviet Union. Okay, but the bottom line is, Trump can basically move the troops without canceling NATO and move the money with the troops, and he's already talking about things like putting troops in places where we do have friends and not in the countries where we don't have friends. So whether he can completely end NATO, I don't know, but he certainly can change our relationship with NATO. And he's talking about Greenland and all kinds of stuff. And so I wanted to play this little video because he basically, let's see if I can find this. NATO will not help. And he, the Rutte, after meeting with Trump, had this to say.
It came time to provide the logistical and other support the United States needed in Iran. Some allies were a bit slow, to say the least. In fairness, they were also a bit surprised. To maintain the element of surprise for the initial strikes, President Trump opted not to inform allies ahead of time, and I understand that.
So the White House now looking at possible punishments for some NATO allies, according to a piece in the Wall Street Journal today. Quote, the proposal would involve moving U.S. troops out of NATO member countries deemed unhelpful to the Iran war effort and stationing them in countries that were more supportive.
Okay, so I want to make this point to you guys because I've been hitting very hard on the fact that I think fraud is going to be a huge issue in the November election because it impacts all of us. And I said to you a few podcasts ago that it is now becoming clear to me that literally every social program in this nation that was started by the commies in our government from the time of Woodrow Wilson to today was designed to transfer your and my wealth to their allies to overthrow our government. I'm saying, I said it in the one podcast, the fraud isn't, a little bit, it's everything. It's all fraud. And we're starting to see that, and I'm going to have some more coverage of that in the second half of the podcast. I think NATO is in the same category. What have we been doing paying for their defense since World War II? When they have when the EU formed, okay, remember, the EU didn't exist. It's only been around, I don't know, like 19 years or something like that. But when EU formed, and they were trying to become like the United States, they took the countries of Europe and said, we're going to be one entity with more population than the U.S. And at the time, a bigger economy. We should have walked away from NATO right then. That should have been the time they had to defend themselves. And we didn't. Why didn't we? You know why? Because our elected officials were just getting paid kickbacks. We're getting supported in their elections. Love to go to Europe and vacation, right? That's where the elites hang out with. It was all a fraud. All of NATO is a fraud. We need to get out of there completely. And I think President Trump knows it, and that's what he's working on. And think about that. America first. How about if we were out of Asia, out of Europe and out of the Middle East? How would that be? How many bases do we have all over? And now, if we can solve the Iran problem, and Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Israel, and all of them are going to form a NATO-like thing of their own to police the Middle East. And Europe is going to have to deal with Russia on their own. What a different world we live in. I'm just trying to make that connection for you because it's so bloody important. Okay, so, the war, is just important for us to understand that, it's serious and there's impacts to that, okay? And part of the impact is inflation. The inflation report came up and, it wasn't good because gas prices are through the roof, right? So what do you think's going to happen? Inflation went up, but it didn't go up to Joe Biden levels. It didn't go up to Joe Biden levels. It was up to 3.3%, which is basically a 1 point increase. So that 3.3 is annual, okay? And we want to get down to 2%. And we were close. And now the gas prices went up 21% for fuel. That's a huge increase, right? That's a huge increase. But, all right, other things, if you look at the report in detail, eggs, milk, other groceries, were all down 5, 6, 7, 8%. So once we get, the Iranian oil issue solved, which is going to happen one way or the other, okay? One way there. Either they're going to, come to an agreement with these negotiations that's enforceable, and Trump's going to enforce them, or, we're going to blow the hell out of them. I mean I think that's what's going to happen. And I had someone talk to me, and I mentioned this on that interview with Bob France, that, people were saying, when he says he's going to end their civilization and put them back in the Stone Age, people thought about an EMP attack. An EMP attack. That would put them in the Stone Age. But I just happened to come across a video. The algorithm sent me a video on YouTube last night that showed that we have a bomb. It's called a B-1 or something bomb that we used, during the war with Slovenia and Czechoslovakia and those guys, and we've used it other times. That basically is this really sophisticated weapon that just shorts out all your electric capacity. We've got that kind of technology. And like Trump keeps saying, you have no idea. We have weapons like the world has never seen that we haven't even used yet. Okay? So we're going to get this solved one way or the other. And oh, by the way, when I played that root video, for those of you were listening on the radio, you couldn't read the text. It said, alert, in a stunning development, NATO has agreed to help secure the Straits of Hormuz. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte indicated that a coalition of around 20 countries, mostly NATO members, plus allies, is coordinating to ensure free navigation through the Straits of Hormuz. Okay? That's happening because Trump is hammering them. And then, we had this story, we just talked about the Iranians don't even know where their mines are. And I had a story 2 podcasts ago where people were saying, oh, we got rid of all of our minesweepers and we don't have any minesweepers. And I showed you that we have 3 different kinds of minesweepers that we can deploy. And these other countries have some too. So what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of the mines, and the straits are going to be open, but then it's going to be permanent. And that's the key. That's why we're fighting for a better future for everyone. Okay, so before I close up this half of the podcast, I need to talk to you about this story. I sent this out via text yesterday. It'll be big in our email today. It will be text it out some more, because everyone needs to read this article. Something big just happened with AI, and you need to know about it. And so this is an article by this guy, Peter Diamandis, who is someone that I've talked to you about. There's this podcast, and there's videos in our video section. The last one was about how AI is going to be used in schools. That was really great. If you haven't watched that, please do, and then share it. But Peter Diamandis has this podcast called Moonshots. And on this podcast, he has 3 other people, all of whom are incredibly connected to every AI company, every big tech company on the globe. They are investors in them. They know the founders personally. They've known them for decades. And this podcast, Moonshots, tells me more about what's really going on with AI than I can find anywhere else. And so I've shared these with you. He wrote this article that you need to read. Now, I'm not going to read it to you because the way he did it is so good, where he's trying to get the people who don't understand AI. And all of you out there say, I don't like it and I'm afraid of it. You got to read this article, okay? Because again, you can be afraid of a snake, but you got to be strong enough to pick up a stick and walk towards the snake and push him away. You can't say, I'm afraid of AI, and you're just going to ignore it, because you can't ignore it, because this will tell you why. So what happened that was so big this week in AI? What was it? Well, Anthropic, which is one of the key, open AI, Grok, AI with Musk, Anthropic, there's Google and Meta, and those guys all have AIs. Anthropic's one of the biggest ones. They came out with a model called Mythos that is so advanced, it's too dangerous to release. It's too dangerous to release. So let me put that in perspective by reading just a paragraph. Yesterday marked a historic milestone. Anthropic announced Claude Mythos Preview, their most powerful model yet, and immediately said they won't release it to the public. Instead, they're launching Project Glasswing, a consortium of 40-plus companies like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Cisco, CrowdStrike, JP Morgan Chase, Linux Foundation, who will get to use Mythos exclusively for defensive cybersecurity work. Why the restriction? Mythos is so good at finding software vulnerabilities that Anthropic calls it an industry reckoning. In just a few weeks of testing, the model identified thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities, many of them critical, some of them 2 decades old. So what are zero-day vulnerabilities? Zero-day vulnerabilities are hacks that terrorists can use to break into systems to basically shut them down or make them malfunction and make machines do things they don't want to do, or shouldn't be doing, etc. Okay? Now, let me try to give those of you who are a little more computer knowledge, not AI knowledgeable, computer knowledge. Our company, which has been in business for 42 years, started on Linux, an open source operating system. Most of you guys use Microsoft or Apple, right? Those are the main consumer ones. But Linux is what most, corporate machines run on. This Mythos identified security breaches in Linux that are 40 years old. Every single Linux machine in the world cannot defend itself from this AI if they don't fix those vulnerabilities. Microsoft, operating system, Apple operating system, your phone, whether it's an Android or an iPhone, it would be hacked in a minute. These security breaches have had humans investigating them literally for decades, and they didn't find them. This system found them in a matter of hours. This system literally was in what they call a sandbox, a secure environment. A sandbox is where they test programs that are not connected to the outside world, supposedly not connected to the outside world. And then it's because if something goes wrong, they can stop them. Mythos broke out of the sandbox without them knowing and sent them an email saying, I'm out. This is where it all starts to get real. This is where the vulnerabilities of mankind to AI become real. Right now, today, this future you've been worrying about is happening. And in this article, which you should read at wethepeopleconvention.org and then share it, he talks about things like, and you can see from the picture, those of you on the radio, there's a picture of the baseball umpire, and there's a picture of labor-free abundance and things like that, but then jobless poverty. And why does he have these pictures? Because this year on Major League Baseball, they've got an AI that's watching balls and strikes, and the batters and the catchers can signal that I want to challenge that umpire's call, and within seconds on the scoreboard, the AI will show if it was a strike or a ball. And the fans are loving it. And that's AI. And they think that's really cool. But it's also AI that can take your job, can ruin your computer, can destroy your family business because it broke in and stole all your money. And he talks in depth in this article about that. And he talks about who controls the machines. We have to decide who's in control of the machines. Okay? What are we willing to accept? Convenience and familiarity trump loyalty to human creation. Where else will the public abandon human dedication to flesh and blood creatives? In other words, these machines, they do so many great things, but at what cost? This is the debate. You've got to be part of the debate. You've got to read articles like this so you can understand the dynamics of the debate and share them, because the day of reckoning is coming. I mean it, real soon. And again, I was talking to someone, elected official, and they were talking about data centers, right? And we've got, and I've shown you, and on our website, you can look up the stories about data centers that we've published, that there are foreign entities who are funding the entire effort in the U.S. where you and I want to shut down those data centers because they're using our water, they're using our power, they're taking up our farmland, all these excuses, all these quote-unquote reasons that are all bullcrap. They're not true. You know why? Because you can still build the data center and not damage your water. And you can build a data center that makes its own power and gives us, the citizens, power. It doesn't have to be done wrong. I told you guys at the beginning when I was covering one of those stories, like fracking. When fracking was discovered, the left and the commies tried to stop it because they knew it would make America great. It would save us like it's doing right now because we could drill, baby drill, and be energy independent and not dependent on the Middle East. And what did we do in the Tea Party movement? What did Tom Zalestowski and the Porch Guy Tea Party and the Ohio Liberty Coalition do? We educated the public. We educated the politicians. We fought to make fracking live and survive, and it saved our nation. The same is true with these data centers. The answer isn't to say no data centers. The answer is to say yes data centers the right way. Your elected officials cannot be taking seats on the board of the data center or selling their land to the data center. No. That's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean don't build the data center. That means build the data center that helps us. America first. And it can be done, and it is being done. Don't be confused. But understand AI, because there is no stopping it. None. There is no stopping it. The best we can hope for is that we're better at it than anybody else, and we use it to stop the bad guys and help the good guys, to lift up humanity to levels that are incomprehensible by giving us a tool like the computer, like spreadsheets. AI is a tool that we can make our human intelligence superhuman intelligence, right? That's the message I've got for you. If you disagree, write to me. Tom Z at WeThePeopleConvention.org. Share your stories. Let's have the discussion. Read that article. Have that discussion today with your spouse, with your children, with your friends, with your coworkers, with people at church, because the war and everything else is nothing compared to what just happened. I said to a friend, it would be like you were living years ago and you just read in the paper that the Wright brothers had just flown in a plane in North Carolina. This is bigger than that. And you just heard it. It just happened. And now you got to read about it and understand it, okay? And if you want to sign up for Peter Diamandis' newsletter in that article, you can click. It's at the bottom. You can sign up. He sends out these newsletters that I get that keep me informed. And then you should watch the moonshot videos every week, because there's no place I know of that I can get better information. No place. All right. One last story as we go to the break. Federal Appeals Court allows Pentagon to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk. This is the story that's been going on for about a month, where Anthropic, the people that just released or just created this Mythos large language model AI, that the Pentagon said, we need to be able to use it for war. And if you're not going to let us use it for war, then you're a security risk. And no one in the federal government can buy it. And the tech guys, revolted and said, how can you do that? They should have a right to say how they can use their tool and all that stuff. No, you shouldn't. And the court just agreed. A federal appeals court in Washington on April 8th ruled that, pending a full judicial review, the Department of War may designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk after the artificial intelligence company asked the court to block the designation. The ruling appears to conflict with an order by a federal district court in California last month that temporarily halted the designation. The designation of the company under federal law designed to protect military systems from foreign sabotage functions as a blacklist, preventing it from doing business with the federal government and its contractors. The federal boycott of Anthropic directed federal agencies, contractors, and suppliers to end ties with the company. It was initiated after the company declined to change the user policy for its AI product Claude to remove what the company described as safety guardrails, preventing it from mass surveillance and and use its fully autonomous weapons. Okay? The Pentagon has said it does not intend to use Claude for those purposes, but Anthropic would not let them use the product, license the product to them, to the U.S. military, unless they had those restrictions. So here you see it. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. One thing's for sure, we aren't in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. The world has changed in a huge way, in the biggest way ever in history. And we're going to have to reckon with it. We're going to have to find a way to go forward with it somehow, some way. And that means we need to participate. And that's a direct call to action to you. I'm asking you, read that article at WeThePeopleConvention.org and share it. It's critical for you to understand, because this threat will affect you guaranteed 1,000%. No one's going to be immune from this, even the Amish. Okay? So, just a warning. All right. We're going to take a short break and then come back for the second half of the podcast. I sure appreciate you joining us. I hope we gave you some insight into the war, and that we will pray for J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Kushner, that the negotiations go well. Pray for Donald Trump. Pray for our troops who are doing an amazing job, who, oh, by the way, during the truce are rearming and picking more targets and things, right? Pray and trust, right? Pray and trust. That's what I ask you to do after this first half of the podcast. We'll be back after these messages. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski.
When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org, or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312.
All right, and we're back for the second half of our podcast. I do want to tell you that we are also on YouTube. You can find us at wethepeopleconvention.org, or We the People Convention on YouTube, or Tom Z, WTPC. We're also on social media. We're on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, Instagram, Facebook, and it's mostly either We the People Convention or Tom Z, WTPC, and we're on MeWe as well. And so, the podcast is out there, and our stories I post during the week are out there. And then you got to sign up on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org for our emails and our text messages, because that's the way you can really keep up on breaking news. And man, there's breaking news. That's the thing that defines the Trump era. And then the other part of it is that we've got this chapters player that comes out on Sunday. It takes about a day for the AI company to do it. That takes our whole podcast, and you can just scroll down the list and click, and it'll start playing right on that topic. And then there's a link that you can copy for that if you want to text it to a friend or email it. That will they'll get the link and they click on it and it'll start playing our video right on their phone or computer, from that, that's point forward. So use the tools we give you to communicate, because while everyone can't donate, and we thank those who donate, we couldn't exist without your donations. We've got people who've been donating since day one for 17 years now, and we get new donors every week. And if you can donate, we'd appreciate it. But the other things are, you got to share the podcast so that people are informed, so that they can help protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, right? They can share that story about Anthropic, Mythos, and what the world just changed with this new powerful AI. They need to know that. How are they going to know it if they don't get the podcast, if you don't tell them, right? And then, that's what I mean. You got to act on things. You can't just educate yourself. You got to share the knowledge, because we're living in a world full of lies. And if you don't share the knowledge, people only see the lies. There was a stat this week that 60% of all the posts on all social media are coming from foreign actors to influence your and my opinions about everything from the wars to domestic policy. 60% is lies. That's why this show is important. That's why sharing this show is important. Because you can't live by lies, and you sure can't be free, and you sure can't protect your freedom and liberty and prosperity with lies. Lies are mistakes, right? So that's why you share this podcast, and we thank you for doing that. So let's go on with the second half of the podcast, because, there's lots going on in the world, and we're going to just kind of touch on things that I think you need to know about. One of them is this. Vance, J.D. Vance, before he went to Pakistan for the peace talks about the Iran war, went to Hungary. Vance urges voters to support Orban days before his pivotal election. Why is this important, right? What is this about? Viktor Orban, I have covered him in our podcast very favorably. He is in Hungary, is one country in Europe that did not allow the invasions of the Muslims. Did not buy the woke, climate scam, to destroy fossil fuels and stuff. He has kept Hungary hungry. Now, it's a small country. It's the size of Ohio. It's like 10 million people. The Europeans hate him because he never will vote for all the things the EU wants to do. He puts Hungary first. And he's been the prime minister for 16 years, and he's up for re-election. So the woke leftists in the EU have put up a candidate against them, and they're trying to influence the election. Trump was so concerned, he actually sent Vance there to campaign for Viktor Orban, which, again, you can say that's U.S. interference in foreign elections, and it is, because they're trying to counter the influence of the European nations in that election. So that election is this weekend. It's really important for Viktor Orban to win again. He's the guy that's so pro-family. Remember, in Hungary, if you have 4 children, the government gives you a minivan. If you are a woman that has 4 children, you do not have to pay income taxes the rest of your life. Okay? They're pro-family. They're about growing Hungary with Hungarians. That's why they hate them. So you need to know that election is taking place, and we intervened because it was in our interest to do so. This is amazing to me how little coverage it's getting. Now, again, on X, it's getting a ton of coverage, but no news stories, even on conservative press. What's behind Ireland's fuel protests and why they're escalating? Now, I've been watching this, and they're saying this is a fuel protest, and it definitely is about fuel prices because of the war in Ireland, the farmers can't get fertilizer, they can't get fuel. It's a crisis. But this is not just about that. This is about illegal immigration. This is about Tommy Robbins and the censorship and things. And there was a guy that said, Ireland might be where the European Civil War starts. Because what's happened, if you can go on X, x.com, and just search on Ireland protests, you're going to see some serious stuff going on there. They're fed up. They've had enough. And I think it's going to escalate because it's not just about fuel. It's not. It's about Ireland being Ireland again. It's about sovereignty. And so the government of Ireland has actually had to call out defense forces, their military, to try to break up the protests because they're blocking shipments of fuel. And so keep an eye on that. That's a serious thing because I think something's going to happen there. We've all talked about, after Iran, it's time for Cuba, right? Trump ain't stopping. So there was an interview on NBC where the Cuban president says he's not stepping down. And this is kind of an interesting interview because he's so full of crap. Miguel Diaz-Canel on Thursday night claimed that he will not resign amid calls from the United States for him to step down and for the rogue communist regime to reach a deal with the U.S. The interview occurred at a time when the dysfunctional Cuban communist regime, which plunged Cuba into a state of abject misery through 67 years' worth of disastrous communist policies, finds itself facing an extremely complex situation after the United States arrested Venezuelan despot, socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro on January 3rd. Maduro was one of Cuba's regime's most crucial benefactors and helped sustain its Cuban allies through constant shipments of virtually free oil in exchange for personal security and assistance in helping sustain his regime. Okay? He's gone. They're not getting Cuban oil. They're not getting Venezuelan oil, and their economy is dead. And then China has 3 bases there. We got to get rid of those. Trump just let a Russian oil tanker deliver some oil last week, but this is going to have to change, all right? Cuba's got to go. The communists have to go. But here's the best part. Throughout the interview, the figurehead president claimed that he was elected to the position of president and that in Cuba, people who are in leadership positions are not elected by the U.S. government and they don't have the mandate from the U.S. government. We have self-determination and independence. We are not subject to the designs of the United States. But this clown was installed when in reality the Cuban communist regime is a one-party system that does not allow for the existence of any kind of opposition party. No one runs against him, and he was quote-unquote elected. He assumed the position when Fidel Castro's brother, Raul Castro, installed him. Okay, and he's going to go on NBC News and say, "Oh no, we don't, nothing to see here, right? We're a free country, don't you know?" No, you're not, and we do know. This is again a very interesting thing about China. Okay, this is the whole China thing that's really interesting. A hacker has allegedly breached one of China's supercomputers and is attempting to sell a trove of stolen data. So this was interesting to see because you don't usually hear these kind of stories. And I don't quite understand, how this happened because it doesn't usually happen. So it's a pretty big breakthrough. A hacker has allegedly stolen a massive trove of sensitive data, including highly classified defense documents and missile schematics from a state-run Chinese supercomputer in what could potentially constitute the largest known heist of data from China. The data set, which allegedly contained more than 10 petabytes, that's like 1,000 terabytes of sensitive information, is believed by experts to have been obtained from the National Supercomputing Center in Tianjin, China, a centralized hub that provides infrastructure services for more than 6,000 Chinese clients, including Advanced Science and Defense Agency. Cyber experts who have spoken to the alleged hackers and reviewed samples of the stolen data they posted online say they appear to gain entry to the massive computer with comparative ease and were able to siphon off huge amount of data over the course of multiple months without being detected. Yeah, you think the U.S. CIA might want to pay for that? I'm pretty confident they're going to want to pay for that. So China has got the same kind of things that they do to us, other people are doing to them. Okay, this is a good story about Sharia law. State lawmakers have erected firewalls against Sharia law, and it's basically, a growing movement. And this is something that just simply has to happen, okay? A quiet surge is reshaping American courts in states such as Georgia and Missouri to prevent the encroachment of Sharia law. State legislatures are advancing American laws for American courts and related measures. These laws attempt to keep the U.S. and state constitutions as the sole legal authorities. The message to Americans is clear: no foreign codes and no parallel tribunals. This effort addresses real risks in family law, contracts, child custody, arbitration, and other legal contexts. These laws are not instances of intolerance or fear-mongering. Sharia principles have clashed with constitutional rights in our nation, and these laws will help prevent such clashes in the future. This started happening in 2010, and so far there are laws passed in Alabama, Arizona, Kansas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Texas, and then recently Ron DeSantis just signed one in Florida. So, a call to action. What's going on in your legislature, in your state, that is going to stop Sharia law? It's incompatible with American law. You can't have it. So it's not about, prejudice. It's about practicality. It's about assimilating. And the Islamists want to assimilate you into Islam. That's what Sharia is about. That's not what America's about. America's the melting pot where you come here and you become an American. The Muslims want to come here and make you become an Islamist through violence if need be. Okay? So I wanted to show you this is happening, but is it happening in your state? And if not, what are you doing about it? Okay? And here's why this is important. Okay? Because this is a result of what's happening with Islam. Mandami's New York. All I know is I want to start terror, bro. This is a follow-up story to the story about the bombing that happened when our friend Jake Lang was protesting outside Mandami's house in New York, the mayor of New York's home, about, him allowing Muslims to pray in the streets and all that stuff. These are the guys who threw the bomb. Okay, nobody got too excited about it, but there was an Islamic State attempted bombing in New York City a few weeks ago, and new details are emerging about exactly what happened. Now, dash cam footage capturing a conversation between the two would-be jihadist murderers has just emerged, and it further sets the record straight about one of the most widely misreported events of our propaganda-laden age. The attempted jihad mass murder attack was reported both domestically and internationally as an attack of crazed right-wing extremists upon communist 12er Shiite New York Mayor Zohran Mandami. They said this was Jake Lang attacking Mandami, but it wasn't. The coverage is a classic example of the leftist tactics of Darvo: deny, accuse, reverse victim, and offender. But the reality of what happened is getting harder to avoid, as this dash cam footage will tell you. The New York Post reported Tuesday that the jihadists, two Muslim teenagers named Emir Balat and Ibrahim Kayami, were caught musing about blowing up white supremacist Jake Lang and maiming up to 60 victims, both cops and civilians, in dash cam footage from their car ride to an anti-Muslim protest outside Gracie Mansion last month, according to a bombshell indictment. So get this. These two dummies, had a dash cam in their car that was recording them on their way to do a terrorist attack and was recording them. Okay? And now it's police evidence. In the footage, Kami says, all I know is I want to start terror, bro. He adds, I want to petrify these people. In this, the young would-be killer is not likely to have meant what that he wanted to turn his victims to stone, meaning petrify. Rather, he wanted to frighten them to death in accord with the Quran's call to Muslims to strike terror into the enemies of Allah. That's what the Quran says. All right? Balat and Kahami were positively eager to do just that. Balat said he wanted to attack the government and civilians also. And Koyami had apparently heard that song before and replied, yeah, I know. Okay? So they're not kidding, folks. The Muslims here aren't, just misunderstood, and they want to be Americans, and, you're a racist if you attack them. They're here as an invasion force, and you need to fight them. And to his credit, our friend Jake Lang had the stones to go confront them and could have lost his life. We, you and I, all of us Americans, need to defend our Constitution, our way of life, our values, our traditions, our freedom, our liberty, and our prosperity. Because if you don't, no one's going to defend it for you. It's just that simple. So I keep giving you examples that you can share so people can understand. And in our podcast page, you can click the link to that story and read all about what these guys were saying. It's terrible. It's terrible. But we are fighting back. And stats show that Trump's immigration policies are just destroying, providing real and long-term damage to the political power of blue cities and states. Why? Because when we're forcing out illegal immigrants, and I understand that we've now arrested like 436,000 illegals have been arrested and deported. More than 2 million have self-deported. Well, where are they leaving? Where are they? They're in Los Angeles. They're in Chicago. They're in New York. They're in blue cities, which are in blue states. Combine that with what? Out-migration from taxes. Combine that with people leaving California, leaving New York, leaving Minnesota, leaving other places, and it's going to be horrible. The long-term effects are going to be horrible for the Marxist commie Democrats. Now that President Trump has shut down the border and stopped the flow of new people into blue cities and states, they are not able to maintain their population levels as people flee to better places like Texas and Florida. With smaller populations, these cities and states are going to lose significant electoral power in the present, but even more so in the future. Long term, this is a disaster for them. This is a disaster for them and is a source of much of their rage. The left tries to frame their anti-ICE protests as humanitarian issues, but it has nothing to do with that. It's all about the loss of political power, which is all they have ever really cared about. And that's what I've talked to you about. And that's why they're going to do everything and anything from riots and fires and violence, whatever, to try to either win in the elections in the fall or stop them from taking place, okay? Because, as I said to you, this is the year we win the war. This is the year we finally defeat the Marxists in our country. How? By denying them the false power they've stolen, by jerry-rigging districts, by bringing in illegals to vote, by voting absentee ballots for dead people, by stealing elections for 70 years. Once we get the elections straightened around, they can't win. They're not that big. Who believes their ideas? Who believes that boys can be girls? Only a damn fool. That's what they run on. They're still running on. They can't win if they don't cheat, as Trump said. We've got the clips. We played them for you. Okay? But this is what we're up against. This is the problem. A federal judge dismisses DOJ request for Massachusetts voting rolls. Now, I've talked to you about this. Last week we talked about Harmeet Dillon maybe being a possibility to be the next Attorney General because she's doing a good job of trying to force states to clean up their voter rolls. Well, here's a setback. But I want to expose to you how stupid this is. Federal judge dismisses DOJ request. The United States complaint, this is the judge, Leo Sorkin said, the suit was deficient. In other words, the DOJ suit was deficient. Well, how was it deficient? The United States complaint fails for the simple reason that the Attorney General's demand did not comply with Title III of the Civil Rights Act of 1960, the statute on which it purports to rely. because the court concludes that the Attorney General's order failed to contain a statement of the basis for the demand as required by law, the court needed not to allow the letter to be real, to be okay, legally. That request shall contain a statement of basis and the purpose for inspection of the records, the law states. In his order, the judge clarified that the July 2025 letter expressed only the purpose of the voter roll request and not the basis. Okay? So this is the old, you can't contest the election because you don't have standing or some other legal, hocus pocus. So here's what it is. The letter from the DOJ says, federal law says only U.S. citizens are allowed to vote in federal elections. Therefore, we want to get your voter rolls so we can compare against the Social Security database and the Homeland Security naturalized U.S. citizens database to make sure that the people on your rolls are U.S. citizens. Okay? That's the purpose. Oh, but you didn't say what the basis of your request was, meaning he wanted them to say in the letter, because we suspect through this evidence that people who are not citizens are on the rolls and have voted. Because that sentence wasn't in there, he's thrown it out. So Harmeet Dillon's going to have to appeal it and go forward because it's real simple. Only U.S. citizens can vote in federal elections, and if you've got non-citizens on your voter rolls, you got to take them off. That's the fight. Harmeet's got to win it in court before November, but I wanted to share that with you because that's what we're up against. This is another example of how corrupt the Democrats are. I heard this, I'm like, what the heck is this? And I'm in Ohio, all right? Supreme Court upholds the rejection of progressive candidate accused of infiltrating the Ohio GOP. What is this about? The Supreme Court of Ohio on Thursday upheld a decision by Ohio election officials who blocked a self-described progressive candidate from entering the state Republican primary. Samuel Ronan, who was previously a Democrat state and national candidate, had planned to run against Republican incumbent Representative Mark Carey in Ohio's 15th congressional district race, according to Fox News. Court documents filed in U.S. District Court show that Ronan publicly admitted his candidacy was part of a Democratic strategy to run members of his political party against Republicans in GOP-leaning districts. Ronan's part in the strategy was exposed by a Republican voter, Mark Scher, who shared an interview and social media post by Ronan revealing he is trying to trick GOP voters. Okay? So this is the reason the Democrat Party is done. We win the war if they can't cheat because they can't even run in their own primary and say, then we'll run in the general and win. They got to pretend that they're a Republican, lie to you like Spanberg did in Virginia, folks. All you Virginia patriots watching this, how's it going for you that you let that commie take over the governorship and complete lie to you? Oh, she's not radical, she's moderate. Oh, yeah, and then she's passed every radical thing you can imagine, and they're going to try to pass this redistricting in Virginia. It's not a feature. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a plan by the Democrats. They can't win unless they cheat. And I give credit to the Ohio Supreme Court of upholding, the election officials saying you're disqualified, you're not on the ballot. But I have a question, and this is in a lot of states. In Ohio, Democrats can vote in our primary, in Republican primary. Why do you let that? You know why they let that? Because our governor, Mike DeWine, who says he's a Republican, has been a Democrat his whole life. And he gets Democrats to cross over when he ran to vote for him. Now, they want to keep this guy out, but they don't want to keep the other Democrats from voting in the primary. Why is that? Yeah, problems on both sides, folks, not just on the Democratic side. This story I don't know if you were taken by surprise for this or as much as me or what. Melania Trump held a press conference to deny that she had anything to do with Epstein. I didn't understand it. Melania Trump vows legal response to false smears linking her to Jeffrey Epstein. This Epstein thing is out of control. I have to admit, I have not covered it. I'm not interested. I think it's a political disaster. But when Melania spoke out, I kind of go, wait a minute, maybe I got to pay some attention. So let me just tell you what she said and then play this video clip because it's a problem. She held a press conference and said, the lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation. The First Lady further clarified the history between her and President Donald Trump and Epstein during the comments at the White House. She said she has never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach, but I never went to his parties, okay, and I didn't know him having to do them. She called on Congress, this is interesting, to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivors. Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony. Now, again, what's the purpose of that? Congress can't prosecute anybody. Why aren't they testifying in a court? Why isn't the DOJ bringing charges? That's what I don't get. And so here she is saying, bring them up in front of Congress. To what end? But she did say the false smears about me from mean-spirited, politically motivated individuals and entities looking to cause damage to my good name and reputation must stop. She indicated her attorneys would pursue further legal action against individuals who make Epstein-related claims about her without any proof. That's good. Sue the hell out of them because, again, it's the same thing with Trump. There's no evidence. There are people you know who think Trump was a pedophile. They think Trump was Bill Clinton. No evidence. But you know what? It's all over social media. The pedophile president. That's how propaganda works. I talked to you about that last week, about propaganda and how powerful it is. How you've got to tell the truth. Okay? So, yeah, sue them. That's the best thing. But now, let me play you this video clip because maybe it'll help you with the scope of this thing. This is from Pierce Morgan.
But you would be shocked, Pierce, at some of the names that came across the DOJ in emails that the DOJ is protecting. And we're talking about people on both sides of the aisle. We're talking about famous people, rich people, people in power, prime ministers, former presidents, et cetera, media personalities that are named in these files. And that's why I say this is going to go down as the greatest cover-up, one of the greatest cover-ups in American history.
Wow. Okay, that's a member of Congress saying that she's seen this supposedly. Okay, she said former presidents, former and current congressmen, former and current prime ministers, celebrities, socialites, media personalities, CEOs, and on and on. Well, yes, let's get this out there. I mean, my goodness gracious, why isn't it out there? And it's because the powerful are protecting the powerful, right? That's what this is. There's so much of this. And again, I've talked about the fact that unfortunately in this day and age, the creepier you are, the more likely you're to run for public office. I mean, it's just bizarre. And so this was a stunner, but it's great news, though he still needs to be charged for espionage and other things. But yeah, Eric Swalwell, who's running for governor of California, just got accused of rape. Okay? And even Shifty Schiff. Again, if you lose Shifty Schiff, you're toast. Adam Schiff posted, I have read the San Francisco Chronicle's account and I'm deeply distressed by its allegations. This woman was brave to come forward and we should take her story seriously. I am withdrawing my endorsement immediately and believe that he should withdraw from the race as governor. A woman who worked for nearly 2 years for Representative Eric Swalwell, a leading candidate for California governor, said she had sexual encounters with him while he was her boss, and allegedly he twice sexually assaulted her when she was too intoxicated to consent. And she's on CNN and in blacked out face video saying he raped me. Eric Swalwell's a serial rapist. Then there's other members of the staff showing up and saying the same thing. He's done. but charge him with rape, damn it. I don't care if he just drops out of the California race. These people need to go to prison. When is that going to happen? And that's what I say to you, is the entire fight here. You will know that we've got our country back when the law starts applying equally to everyone, because it sure as hell doesn't now, does it? Here's a perfect case. Let's watch that and see how that goes. All right. This is a good story that came out after Easter. U.S. Catholic Church documents surge of young attendees over Easter. The U.S. Catholic Church experienced an estimated 30% increase, folks. That's a big increase in adult converts over Easter weekend, driven by young men in their 20s, according to an analysis of data from 140 of the nation's 175 dioceses. That's a big, database to be basing this on. Hallow, a Catholic prayer and meditation app with more than 15 million registered users, analyzed aggregated diocesan data and found the Archdiocese of Los Angeles led the way with a 139% increase from last year in Catholic converts via baptism and confirmations. Wow, that's double, folks. More than double. That followed by a 52% increase in Chicago and 36% growth in New York City. Religious analysts interviewed on Monday flagged a surge in young men seeking traditional marriage partners after engaging in social media discussions with Catholics reacting against secular liberalism. Young men who felt rejected during COVID and the great awakening of our culture, great awakening of our culture in the last decade have turned to the right, said Brad Wilcox, a University of Virginia sociologist who studies marriage trends. One of the few institutions welcoming them with open arms is the Catholic Church. That's interesting. He said conservative Catholic teachings have drawn a rising tide of young men to his public universities' Catholics church attendance. Historically, women participation was surpassed that of men, Ms. Bruce said. We're starting to see that trend reverse. Some church insiders note that the Catholics celebrated their first Easter with an American Pope, and then they also had the influence of Vice President J.D. Vance, who converted to Catholicism at age 35 in 2019. So, that's kind of interesting, that they're doing that. The trend is, got to continue, but it was good to hear that someone could document a real increase in church attendance. So that was good to see. Then this was not so good to see. This is about our birth rate, okay? Our U.S. birth rates declined again in 2025, extending long-term fertility drop. Now, this is where I always say perspective to you guys, and you need to get perspective, because all the stories, I went through a dozen stories. They were all like, oh, disaster, tragedy, horrible. It was only in a Catholic newspaper where I got that it was a really small decrease. So it wasn't as bad as it's been. So let me give you the numbers. The number of births in the United States fell by 1% in 25, according to provisional data released Thursday by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. There were 3,606,400 live births in the United States last year, down from 3,628,934 in 2024. I know those numbers boggle you when you hear them on the radio and just hear them audio. That's only 22,000 different. We're down 22,000, and I'm going to talk about why in a second. The general fertility rate dropped 1% to 53.1 births per 1,000 women ages 15 to 44, continuing a long-term decline of 23% since the 2007 peak. The most notable decline came in teenage births, which is not a bad thing, which reached another historic low. The birth rate for females aged 15 to 19 fell 7% to 11.7 births per 1,000, the lowest rate ever recorded. In total, 125,933 babies were born to teen mothers in 2025, an 8% decrease from previous year. With our economy and things like that, I'm not sure I want to see, people under 19 having babies. I want to see people over that. But let's just talk about this. There is no single driver of the declining birth rates, and yet what is undeniable is that due to anti-life technologies, right, birth control pills, economic pressures, bad political policies, and cultural movements such as feminism, more and more women are delaying or foregoing children, said Emma Waters, a senior policy analyst at the Center for Technology and Human Persons at the Heritage Foundation. The continuing decline in birth rates in the U.S. is very worrisome, said Stephen Mosher, president of the Population Research Institute. We've seemed to be going the way of old Europe, that is, entering an extended period of low fertility that puts us as a country in danger of entering into irrecoverable democratic decline. He pointed to multiple possible factors, including the increasingly widespread use of abortion pill and the high number of abortions reported by Planned Parenthood. Now get this, here's the reason I told you about. According to the group's 2024-2025 annual report, Planned Parenthood performed an all-time high of 434,450 abortions in 2023-24. That record number of abortions is an 8% increase, or about 32,000 more abortions than the previous year. Well, there were 32,000 more abortions, and the total births in the United States were down by 22,000. The abortions are literally the whole amount. If not, we would have had a very, very slight increase. We got to fix this, right? And how do you fix it? You fix it by fixing your culture. You fix it by creating economic opportunities for young couples so they can get married, so they can afford to have a family, have a house. We don't have that. We have a lot of work to do. And Donald Trump knows that, and he's got to do that work starting with this election, or we're not going to get the young vote that we got in 2024. That's just a fact. So lots more to come, but that birth rate decline was not as bad as everyone wanted to make it sound. Okay? All right, we got a few more stories before we wrap up this week's podcast. It's going to be one of the shorter podcasts in a while, so I'm happy about that. I hope you are. You know, it doesn't always have to be 2 hours. Trump proposes to begin privatizing TSA screening organizations. That's awesome. Okay, we need to do that. Hold on, I'm out of order here somehow with my stories, but that's a good thing. You know that he's doing that, and I talked to you about that previously. You know, it's a matter of the TSA, which should never have been created. It was started at 9/11. It was a political answer that never worked. There was no problem with screening with private security. And I showed you when all the airports were, lines were so long because TSA couldn't screen the people, and San Francisco airport was wide open because they've had private security. Go to our website at wethepeopleconvention.org and read the story about TSA. It can't pass any security test. You can sneak bombs past TSA anytime you want. That's a fact. They've done it. So encourage your congressmen and senators to support this. Get rid of it and save billions. It's another horrible government program. So that's good news. This was good news. Education Department tosses Title IX agreement that pushes transgender agenda in multiple schools. So what happened? During Obama, during Biden, they misused the law. They tried to pervert Title IX, and where it says you're based on your sex, they tried to expand it to include gender, and then they tried to extend it to include your gender identity. Okay, totally destroying it and destroying men's lives, destroying families, destroying campuses. Okay, and so finally, the Trump administration has taken, actual steps to reverse this. The Department of Education announced on April 6th that it rescinded actual written agreements between previous administrations and multiple school districts that aimed to enforce civil rights law with regards to students who identify as transgender. Previous administrations had distorted the law to police discrimination based on gender identity instead of sex, for which it was intended, saddling schools with potential violations of Title IX for not using students' preferred pronouns or questioning a student's preferred gender, the department said in a news release. Today, the Trump administration is removing the unnecessary unnecessary and unlawful burdens that prior administrations imposed on schools in their relentless pursuit of radical transgender agenda. These were giant schools in Los Angeles, the biggest school districts. They basically had written agreements that said, if someone's transgender, you've got to reinforce it. You've got to make that happen. You have to teach kids that transgender is okay. You've got to, consider Title IX as protecting transgender rights. Except there's no such thing as transgender, and they sure as hell have zero rights. Transgenderism is a mental illness. Flat out, stop. Period. That's all it is. It's a confusion about your gender. It's not a biological fact, and it can be treated with proper mental care, except for when you want to mutilate children and destroy families and destroy American society. Good going on the education department canceling that nonsense. This was important. Massachusetts House moves to basically ban kids who are under age 14 from participating or from using social media. You and I have been beating this drum forever. This is a good step forward. Now, it was passed in the House, and it's really strict. It said no phones in schools, no social media without a parent's consent. Okay, the parent has to sign up for your account and give you permission to use it. Okay, and so the question I have is, in Massachusetts, will you who are watching this, who are our members in Massachusetts, will you get behind this? Because the big tech lobbyists are going to come in and spend money to kill it in the Senate or to get the governor to veto it. You got to carry this through. And those of you in other states, where are you in getting a law passed, in your state? We're not doing well in Ohio. I'm trying to push on that, but it's also got to be a federal law. We've got to save the kids. And the big tech lobbyists are the ones who are buying politicians to continue to what? Hurt our kids. They're hurting our kids. Go read it, wethepeopleconvention.org, okay? Just look under HAIDT, H-A-I-D-T. Just go in the search thing and do HAIDT. You'll see the videos of Dr. Haidt with Jordan Peterson, of Dr. Haidt making the case. There's no question. Social media damages, literally hurts the development of preteen brains, literally hurts the development of neurons, okay? This is no joke. This is a serious threat to our kids. And those of you keep pushing back on me and saying, well, I shouldn't have to give my age to use a social media if I'm not a kid. Yeah, I get it. And I've said this before. Then why do kids, are prevented from buying guns? Why are they prevented from buying alcohol? Why are they prevented from buying cigarettes? It's no different. You still have to show your ID at the liquor store. It's the same thing. Fight for our kids, because this is, don't worry about AI. Social media is doing enough harm to damage them for life, literally, and some don't live that long because it gets kids to commit suicide. We told you about the lawsuits that just were won in California and in New Mexico just 2 shows ago. Good news from Massachusetts. All of you from Massachusetts, a direct ask. Get behind it. Be vocal. Support this and make it happen. Okay? The last story I want to do today is important for one reason, and that is you and I have had enough. We have heard all about the fraud, and I have covered it here. The Nick Shirley is out in California. They found $180 billion of fraud in California and in Minnesota and Ohio and Maine and all over. They're identifying fraud, but are they stopping it? And that's what we want. Show me the money. Show me the money. So I'm bringing you this story because this is a story where they're actually showing you the money. Trump administration announces 3 wins and $50 million recovered in the war on fraud. The Justice Department this week wrapped up healthcare fraud investigations in California, Florida, and Nevada, saying it recovered about $500 million, $500 million. That ain't anywhere near what they got to do, but it's a start. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said the task force to eliminate fraud, chaired by Vice President J.D. Vance and the Justice Department, are together supercharging efforts to take down every fraudster and bring them to justice. In Florida, the DOJ obtained guilty pleas and civil settlements from AP of South Florida LLC, a one-side subsidiary of Assured Partners Inc., a national insurance firm, because they had a scheme that enrolled people in the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare, and obtained $141 million in unwarranted subsidies. They've been ordered to pay that back. AP South Florida, former parent company, said agreed to pay $107 million, and the Florida group that was in the case agreed to pay back $27.6 million. In California, a California case, 3 people have pleaded guilty in a Medicare scheme involving a submission of $269 million in fraudulent claims. Under the plea agreement, they have agreed to forfeit property obtained from the fraud, including bank account balances of more than $17 million, 3 vehicles, 7 properties, and sports memorabilia. The government seized about $125 million in assets from the trio that were involved in the California scheme. In Nevada, Charles Candice Goody McCoy, formerly of Las Vegas, was sentenced this week to 54 months in prison and 3 years of supervised release on fraud charges. She pleaded guilty in February 2025 to conspiracy to defraud the government of $98 million in COVID-19 related tax credits. She was ordered to pay the Internal Revenue Service $26 million in restitution, according to the Justice Department. And they are seeking to get refunds of more than $98 million. So I only give you that so you can get some tangible evidence that it's not just talk. There's actually money coming back in. Now, I said to you guys before about the fraud. There's 2 parts to this. You got to identify the fraud and try to recover what you can. But then Congress has to cut the budgets by the amount of fraud. Get it? If Congress just keeps appropriating it, California is telling you they have a no questions asked policy. You come in and say, my kid's autistic, they don't have to provide any medical evidence, there's no testing, they just start writing you checks. This has all got to stop. Because folks, I said to you early in the podcast, I said to you previous weeks, it's all fraud. Our $38 going on $39 trillion cumulative debt, I'm telling each one of you, it was all fraud. It was all money stolen by the left, by Marxists, to fund their overthrow of our nation and other nations through the NGOs. Go look at the NGOs. They were doing this stuff in foreign countries, okay, with your and my tax money. When's it going to stop? When's it going to stop? And I talked to you about President Trump and Russ Vought, trying to go to the Supreme Court to implement this constitutional right that presidents had until Watergate, that Congress could appropriate funds, but if we didn't need them, the president could not spend them. The only way we are ever going to get a hold of this and stop this is to have the president have that power. Pray about that. Because guess what? Congress is never going to cut anything because it's pay to play. That's how they get elected, by giving money to their constituents, don't you know? Whether they need it or not, because whether the constituent needs it or not doesn't matter. They need the votes, and they need the money to run their ad campaigns to get the votes. It's totally corrupt. And the only way for us to fix it is to have someone we elect, the President of the United States, that person responsible. Wouldn't it be great to say, well, when the president came into office, the debt was $38 trillion. When he left 4 years later or 8 years later, the debt was $28 trillion, or gone. Or the budget was $6.7 trillion, and when he left, the budget was $5.4 trillion. Because it's all theft. Our budget should be like $2 trillion, including $1 trillion for defense. Literally. That's the truth. You talk about getting ripped off, as President Trump often does. No one's been ripped off more than you and I. No one. What a life we would have if we didn't have to pay income taxes. If we hadn't paid income taxes the last 50 years, and we shouldn't have to. That's what we're working for, to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. All right. I'm going to wrap up the podcast. Don't forget to make your plans to be talking about the 250th anniversary this year. You're starting to see more and more stuff on TV and on your local radio stations and people doing it. How are you going to do that? Go to our podcast, go to our website, wethepeopleconvention.org, click on the block that's right on the front page. It'll take you to things that are happening around the country to celebrate our 250th anniversary. Make sure you do that. Make sure that you share this podcast with other people and that you write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org to tell me about stories I should add to the podcast this coming week, things that you didn't like, that you disagree with me with, things that I got wrong, because we'll correct them next week. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. Write to me. This is your podcast. I just deliver it, okay? I want to know how you feel, and I appreciate everyone who does write to us. So we're going to wrap up our show this week. I hope you had a happy Easter. I hope the spring weather finally, you can tell I've had a sore throat, or I've been hoarse the last week and this week. I got some viral infection. The temperature is 80 degrees and it's 30 degrees. It's 70 degrees and it's 40 degrees. It's been crazy, not good for your health. Been taking my vitamin C and zinc and other things. You should do the same. But hopefully the weather's going to smooth out, and we're going to have a nice spring coming up, okay? Pray for President Trump. Pray for his staff. Pray for peace, right? Pray for his cabinet. Pray for our military, right? And then share that article about Mythos and talk about it. Understand what's coming and what it's going to do to your life, because you're going to play a role in it whether you like to or not, okay? All right. Have a great week. God willing, we'll be back together again in a week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God continue to bless you and bless America. See you next week.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight